Good morning. Gosh, that poem was amazing. Yeah, thank you so much for that. So yeah, good morning and welcome to COVID Relief and Recovery Panel. My name is Dom Fraser and I am the director at the Boiler Room in Guildford. Please feel free to ask us any questions during the course of this panel and I'll do my best to get them answered. This coming year is going to be a supreme test for the nighttime economies and creative industries. We rely on assemblies of people in order to operate profitably. And assembling people is an often unreasonable risk in the presence of COVID-19. So with the whole Grassroots Live community put under immense strain as a result of COVID, during this panel, we're going to look at the independent sector, how we've coped and what the future may hold. So introducing our panel today, we've got Rebecca, who is from the Lead Mill. She's been part of the booking team there for over 10 years and taking up the senior booker and assistant general manager role in 2016. The Lead Mill is a multi-use venue and should be celebrating its 40th birthday this year with a whole host of exciting programming. The Lead Mill is usually alive with a collection of live music, comedy nights, drag and film, and it's been an integral part of Sheffield's creative economy. They have a main room of a standing cap of 900 and a second, which is a steel stage, a standing cap of 250. Up next, we've also got HARKIRIT. He is the venue manager and promoter at the Crescent in York, fully independent 250 cap. Hi, Becca. Hi. His key programming team. His own promotions focus on jazz, hip hop, soul, Afrobeat, psych, techno, disco, and promotes in York and Leeds. He's also part of Jazz Promotion Network, which undertakes advocacy for the UK's jazz sector and a regional coordinator for North East Music Venues Trust. We've also got Maxi from the Prs Foundation. So Maxi joined PRS in May 2016, delivering the communications strategy, including work to champion a diverse range of music creators and make all PRS Foundation opportunities as accessible as possible. She's worked for festivals, venues and talent development organisations in a range of genres, programmed hundreds of new music shows and occasionally presents radio shows too. And our last panellist is Claire. Claire joins us from Arts Council England. She joined in March 2018 and she is responsible for development of national strategy and policy for music in England, including the launch of the new fund for grassroots live music sector and major research into diversity and classical music. Known internationally as a passionate advocate and for innovation and inclusion in music. Claire's current focus is supporting the sector as it emerges into the post-COVID-19 world. I'd like to welcome all of our guests. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
No worries. I'm going to kick off with you, Rebecca. First question I've got for you is government are announcing they're trialling indoor events to reduce cap audiences. I think Frank Turner did one last night at the Clapham Grand. How are you feeling about reduced cap shows?
Feeling positive on the fact that we can possibly look to reopen at some point, but then there's also the economic and financially viable option of it. We've done multiple risk assessments now on the various guidelines that the government has published. 2 metre social distancing would have just put our capacity well below 100, and that would have included staff and the musicians. 1 metre, it's not changing it too much, but it would put us in maybe in a bracket of being able to have seated shows, like more intimate seated shows through comedy, maybe folk or jazz music, and that could be a possibility. But the end of the day is most promoters out there and venue owners out there will know that the music industry in live music venues at the grassroots level works on a very, very tight profit margin anyway. So for us to have a sustainable business model, we need to be looking at least 80% capacity for us to even be financially viable on the long term. It's great for a short term. We've got loads of musicians and loads of acts that are dying to get out there and perform. And we've got some amazing staff that are dying to get back at work. But whether or not it's financially viable for a long-term option is yet to be seen.
HARKIRIT, I'm going to ask you a question. regarding a lot of streaming shows have been going on, and as we said last night, the guys at the Clapham Grand did a socially distanced gig. You are part of the Jazz Promotion Network. I want to ask you, can jazz, or any genre for that matter, can it kind of can it exist in this virtual vacuum that we've created? Can we continue to connect with our audiences and support our artists and crews by doing a lot of virtual streaming?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's been really interesting watching the kind of streaming landscape develop. And I guess part of what's been interesting about it is how sectors like jazz, like some of the kind of wider.
We might be losing you a little bit there. Has anyone else lost him?
Yeah, sorry, HARKIRIT.
Amazing turnout.
It sounds a bit like a robot. And what we'll do, we'll jump on. We'll jump on to another question. Maxi, I'm going to ask you, and then when HARKIRIT is back and up and running, we can go back to that question.
Great.
So, let's have a chat about PRSF. A lot of PRSF funding kind of focuses a lot on artist development. How do you think PRSF are sort of rising to the challenge with regards to grassroots music venues? Could you kind of navigate for any I suppose, independent venue owners that are watching today? Give us an idea of navigation for them, possibly, on how they could look at working with PRSF.
Of course, yeah. So, I mean, I'll say initially that half of all of the money that we give out at PRS Foundation goes to organisations, of which venues is a massive part. So, I mean, when the pandemic hit, we very quickly adapted our open programme, and the fund that I would recommend all venues look at is the Open Fund for Organisations. Our project support does focus on talent development, but we're kind of ensuring that we have a very flexible approach to that, which supports venues. So that includes flexibility on kind of delivery of live activity, supporting hybrid or digital activities, but also ensuring that there's ring-fenced funding for real life events when they're able to happen again. So we've changed some of our budget limitations as well, in response to the pandemic. So we've increased the limit of the grant request amount to contribute to staff, admin and organisational costs. So that means venues can now apply for up to 25% of the grant to go directly to those organisational costs, which means up to £2,500. We're also running a lot of kind of webinars to help with applications. So for the Open Fund for Organisations, you can get a maximum of £10,000, and the next deadline is the 5th of October. So I'd highly recommend any venues watching this kind of checks that fund out, and yeah, engages on our social media channels so that you can kind of watch the webinars that we're hosting. Just a few venues that have had the Open Fund include the Smokehouse and the Forum. It's all kind of for project funding, but yeah, we're very flexible with how we're kind of adapting that to involve venues.
So maybe we could put a link in the Facebook group to signpost people to that funding, I guess.
Absolutely.
Is there the same way as there is in Arts Council? Are there sort of regional coordinators, or are there people that we can talk to on the phone that might be able to help navigate us through any application process?
We don't have regional offices. We're a very small but very passionate team. So, I mean, I'm from Norfolk, and I have very strong links to like the Norwich Arts Centre and the Norwich music scene there. So we all kind of have our regional perspective that we bring to the table. You can get in touch via just contacting our info at prsfoundation.com email, or I'd be happy to share my email on this chat too if any venues are interested in applying to the Open Fund. We're very responsive, and yeah, I'd be happy to chat to any venues that want to apply.
Thank you, that's really kind of you. Moving on then, discussing funding and what's available. Claire, if I can bring you in. So there are currently 3 possible funds available to grassroots music venues. There's the emergency grassroots, it's easy for me to say, the emergency fund, the cultural recovery fund, and the grassroots live music fund. I thought it might be helpful because not everyone that might be watching this might necessarily be a member of the Music Venues Trust. Maybe if you could give an overview of those 3 funds and maybe how they're accessible.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Supporting Grassroots Live Music Fund is a fund that we've been running now for about just over 18 months. And it's what we call our project grant. So again, it's a little bit like the PRSF's Open Fund. It's open to venues of all kinds, both to the venues themselves and to promoters who work in conjunction with grassroots music venues. And they can apply for up to £40,000 to support work, which could be touring projects, it could be doing capital work on a building. So we've had some people come in for everything from repairs to toilets to new lighting rig or sound equipment. Obviously, there's kind of no point in doing work on a building if there aren't artists going in and audiences going in to experience that. So any project that you come into under that fund has to have some kind of public facing expression. And even though obviously at the moment it's a lot harder for projects to have that kind of audience focus, we're really interested in encouraging things that are digital or hybrid, or just give you that space to trial a new approach and test out something that you might not have done before. So with a smaller size audience, or with different kind of artists, or maybe a different genre focus from the way you focused before. So that fund is open and can be applied for right now. We also opened last week a very, very short-term fund, which is called the Emergency Grassroots Music Venues Fund. It closes on Friday of this week. So no, it doesn't. It closes on the 3rd of August at midday. No, it does. It closes on the 3rd of August at midday. I think there's some false information on some of the documentation, but I will double check that before the end of the call and confirm. And it is for applications of up to 80,000 maximum, although we actually expect that the majority of applications will be significantly smaller than that. And it is literally only for venues who believe they may become insolvent by the 30th of September. So it's really trying to pick up on some of the concerns that have been highlighted about venues, particularly where they're under pressure from landlords, or they have outstanding utilities or other maintenance costs that they're unable to meet, which might mean that the venue could close. And we are seeking to support them. But as I say, that is only for venues who think they are likely to become insolvent by the 30th of September. Today, the government is announcing the detail of the new cultural recovery funds. I think probably as we're speaking, if not just before, the guidance document for that fund has gone live. It is for organisations of all kinds, and applications kind of fall into 2 tranches. One I think is probably more relevant to grassroots music venues than the other. So there's a grant programme where organisations can apply for up to £3 million of funding, and a loan programme which is for applications of over £3 million. My inclination is probably most grassroots venues will be looking at the grant programme and the full details of that programme, which I have to confess I haven't seen all of the detail yet, but have been published by the government this morning.
Thank you. So, and there are regional coordinators that, if you're an independent space, you're struggling with the application process, there are people that you can get in touch with that will assist you if you're, if you need it.
Yeah, that's correct. We have a sort of lead for our grassroots music venue work in each area. They can support applications under the standard project grant application. So that's the scheme that's called Supporting Grassroots Live Music. And again, I'm sure that we can easily share the details of that fund. We're not able to provide advice on the emergency fund because its timeline is so short, it just wasn't practical to do that. And we've been asked by the government not to provide support to the main cultural recovery fund on the basis that the volume of different types of organisations that might need to come in is such that it's not practical either. So we can provide support around the project grant fund.
So if you are a venue operator and you're watching this and you don't think that you're going to make it until September, do get in touch with other venue operators like myself, like Rebecca, HARKIRIT, who are here. We're the 3 venues on here, but there are a multitude of other venues because we are here to assist you as well. If we can't help you ourselves, we can signpost you to someone that will be able to help us. So it's really important that you don't get overwhelmed by the weight of worrying about whether you've got to pay your rent, leasing equipment, all those things. I think you guys will probably agree there is help that has never been there before for venue operators and owners like ourselves. And so really this is the time to ask for help if you need it. HARKIRIT, should we jump back into your question now? Actually, regarding the funding that Claire's just been talking about. So if you wanted to, as a venue, set up like a live stream series, this is what you could possibly, apply for funding for. So can jazz, this is the burning question I need to know, can jazz or any other genre kind of exist within a virtual vacuum? Are we killing it by doing live stream after live stream after live stream, or do you think that there is innovation is there for us to be able to provide that vibe that we do so well in venues on screen?
I'll try again now. Hopefully my connection's a bit better. It's been interesting watching the kind of streaming landscape develop. Particularly in jazz, it's been really interesting. There's been like small kind of regional jazz clubs. Like a really good example is the Les Car in Sheffield that have actually had really massive success with and getting kind of their audience to tune in and pay money, and that money is going to support the artists. And I think that although we feared maybe that that people might be kind of put off or that we might be like killing our own industry, I'm now coming around to the idea that there is a kind of future there in a kind of hybridized model, and that it's not a piece of a pie that's going to take away from what we're doing. I actually think that there's room for a whole load of different approaches here. I think particularly with jazz, why it's interesting is, I'd like to think I kind of promote like jazz that's maybe aimed at a younger audience, but there's a lot of regional jazz clubs that do amazing work, and really they do have a kind of age demographic issue with the coronavirus. So I think actually what we need to do is not just view it as like a threat to what we're doing, but almost like an essential service in terms of getting people's art forms out there to the people that want to see it, to their audiences. Another really good example here in York is the National Centre for Early Music. Now, their local audience for what they're doing is kind of, very traditional early music. It was quite small, but through staging like a kind of streaming festival, they were attracting audiences from all over the world, thousands of people. So it's really kind of transformed, opened their eyes as well to be like, wow, our audience is so much bigger than it could have been. Because actually the curious thing is, the more niche something is, the more it kind of actually translates to the internet, where you can find that wider audience. So what can the grassroots music sector as a whole learn from that? I think it's about trying to be innovative in what you're doing, trying to think about what makes you different from the other venue. And I guess where we have a kind of model of a tour, a band will tour and do one show in one city another day and another in another city the other day. I think part of the reason some of us struggled to get our head around it at first was because we were like, how do we replicate that model? When what we need to do is think about what makes a show really unique, like say, for example, in a unique space like Union Chapel or something like that. or we're thinking about doing shows from kind of beautiful, unique spaces in York. Why is it that makes it different? That will make people tune in? A one-off, unique event rather than trying to replicate a touring model.
Yeah, you mentioned hybrid events. Maxi, I just wanted to bring you back in here because we, you know, looking to Europe and what's happening over there at the moment. There's just been the Global Nighttime Recovery Plan, which is a document that's being circulated at the moment, and that looks at what Berlin, Paris, and other European cities are doing with regards to staging of live music or having spaces and innovating around those spaces to provide culture for their cities. You know, a lot of venues may not necessarily be in a city, but I think for us, we can look to cities in the UK, but also in Europe to maybe inspire us to consider what we could do within our town. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I'm the project manager for Key Change, and in Key Change we work with 13 festivals across Europe and Canada, and many of them are multi-venue festivals. And I'll just quickly mention Liverpool Sound City, who have shown innovation really quickly during the pandemic with their guest house platform, and have been able to showcase many of the international Key Change participants on that platform that they wouldn't have been able to kind of showcase to their audience otherwise. So that's been really, really positive. And then we're seeing really amazing work from festivals such as Tallinn Music Week and Reeperbahn Festival, where they're doing things like this kind of hybrid format, where they're hosting IRL events with kind of in venues where the capacity is perhaps half of what it would have been, and where there won't be kind of more than 700 people indoors or 1,500 people outdoors, but they're selling tickets globally for the digital element of the event. And so they're kind of broadcasting every panel, every showcase, and really kind of using the hybrid format to engage wider audiences from across the world. And I think that means a lot for artist showcasing, but it also means a lot for these industry showcases, that you kind of have access to an international network of delegates, which is really exciting. Of course, at Prs Foundation, we understand that that's really challenging for venues, as it kind of often requires financial support and upskilling. And kind of we've seen some applications come in from people who are simply saying they'll go hybrid without evidence of how they'll do that. So we'd like to see everyone kind of coming together, sharing practice, and establishing the kind of a standard of this kind of hybrid format. And we really think that venues are in a brilliant position to do that, with kind of in terms of innovation and resilience, and that kind of direct connection to artists and audiences that venues have. I think we're going to see some really exciting things happening. And yeah, again, we welcome venues to come in for the Open Fund for projects that focus on this kind of hybrid element.
Okay, thank you. Rebecca, I'm just going to bring you in. So we're just coming up to August. What we would normally be doing now, I guess, is we would be expecting, we're a university town in Guildford, I think you are as well, and York. We'd be expecting all little fresh-faced freshers to be coming into town in the next month or so. How are we going to, as spaces, adapt and evolve to the fact that, you know, the landscape is changing? So, you know, we would be expecting freshers, and we'd probably be looking to Halloween, then there'd be Christmas. You know, we've always been quite seasonal spaces. How are you guys approaching it at the Lead Mill? Because I guess you must have a massive freshers events there, and I guess the same in York.
Yeah, I feel really sorry for our club promotions team, because they've got freshers ready to go. It's already planned. They know exactly what's going on. It's ready to basically be put in place as soon as we're given the green light. Yes, we are very seasonal. July and August is typically our quiet time, so this would be the time when we would be doing a lot of planning anyway. Not much inactivity in terms of live music, other than a few festival warm-ups and things like that. But from about September, mid-September to December, we usually are having at least 5 live music events a week, at least 4 club nights a week, and that's just in our space. We also promote across the entire city and use other venues from 100 capacity up to about 2,000. So the whole city is kind of come at a standstill. We're still looking to adapt to that. We're still learning, as everyone is. It's difficult to say when we can get the doors open to full capacity, which is what we're aiming for. But we've worked a long time now to not just solely rely on students as our main source of income. It's very easy to just rely on students to kind of keep the club nights alive and things like that. So we've tried to open up to all communities within Sheffield, all age groups, and welcome everyone in. But yes, we are going to definitely see a deficit if it's just stay at home learning, which I know that most of the universities are looking to do at least for the first semester. I think looking at what the universities are planning, second semester there may be more classrooms open, but we're all in the same boat. We all don't really know what's happening. All we can do is plan, and as soon as we're given the green light, our freshers, whether it's in September or mid-March next year, will be incredible.
You mentioned about crews and anyone that works at a venue, or knows that we're like family, aren't we? Our crews, we see each other at our best and our worst. We shout, mummy and daddy having arguments, and they're like our children, our crew, but also like our brothers and sisters. This has been an especially difficult time for crews, for sound engineers, for bar teams, and this is a question, I guess, to everyone. If you can give me your thoughts on it. How can we look after them? Is there anything that we can do to look after the crews? Because it's challenging for them as it is for us. I don't know. HARKIRIT, do you want to go first? Or you go?
HARKIRIT go first. That's fine.
No, I think he's frozen. You go first.
So yeah, at the lead mill we employ 75 members of staff on payroll alone. That's not even including our contractors. We have a lot of staff that we rely on to maintain and run our events. I think personally, I'm the oldest person that works in our office, and I'm known as Mother Walker in the lead mill office. I deal with a lot of problems with a lot of my staff. I think it's just making sure we're communicating with our staff.
Yeah, sure.
It's very easy.
I guess it's, yeah.
I think HARKIRIT's a bit behind. But yeah, just communication. It's just communicating with our staff and making sure that we're checking in and their health and well-being is being taken care of. And I know at the lead mill we're looking to eventually, when we are getting this pot of money from, fingers crossed, Arts Council and things like that, we're looking at ways of implementing that and sharing that with our contractors to make sure they are looked after.
So Claire, if I could bring you in, is there anything available for our crews and our sort of extended family, our teams within the Arts Council provision?
Not specifically. I mean, one of the big challenges I think with with a lot of the funding that's available at the moment is that either it's focused specifically on organisations, I kind of call them the kind of crucibles of the work. So whether that's a venue or an organisation like a promoter who therefore passes on the benefit to others. And we're obviously strongly encouraging organisations to put in applications that really think through the implications for those wider workforces, because I think the thing I've heard probably more consistently than anything else is that real concern about the infrastructure of the business and the extent to which if we lose critical parts of it, the whole thing just starts to fall down. And with so much less work for everybody, people will drift away because they inevitably inevitably have to find other ways of making an income. So I think considering both the health and well-being of those teams, and then really constructive ways of deploying them. I've heard a few great examples, and I think Rebecca actually possibly has some, but I've heard a few great examples across the sector where just the fact that there's a pause has allowed people to have the space to think about something fresh. So some colleagues in the festival sector were talking about the fact that they'd set a couple of the members of the team full time the opportunity to go away and think about sustainable touring and what they could do differently when things restart. So I think sometimes it's just about giving people a focus, giving them a bit of autonomy in their lives, actually something they can lead on and decide. And, you know, obviously that depends whether they are your employees, and therefore, you know, because of furlough, they've still been able to be paid to some extent. If they're not your employees, they're your contractors, I think building some of those costs into applications is a really, really important thing to do because of that need to care for the whole structure.
Yeah, I think just picking up on that and re-emphasising that point, building in those costs into your applications so that where we can help our crews is, you know, we consider them when we're putting in applications. HARKIRIT, how are you doing?
I don't know. Have I caught up now?
I think so. Do you want to give us your thoughts on that? We talked about our, you know, looking after our crews and our kind of wider family that exists within our music venue ecosystem. Any thoughts on anything that you guys have done to stay connected or to, you know, to reach out to them?
Yeah, I just think just kind of, you know, we're all friends here, and it's very much a kind of loose management structure, I guess. You know, we're really a bunch of mates, and just been trying to keep chatting throughout the lockdown, and when we were able to start kind of meeting up and having some kind of staff meetups and stuff, so distance, of course, we've been able to do that. And then as we're now kind of undergoing like a lot of venue renovation work, trying to take advantage of being shut and stuff, I think we'll be doing things like painting parties and so on. And I guess as well, now that we're trying to think about what other projects we can do whilst the venue's shut, but elsewhere perhaps in York, we're talking a lot to the council and to the university about perhaps outdoor things or things in other spaces that might be like easier to adapt. And then that's another opportunity to, you know, find some work for that crew as well. Yeah.
I mean, that's actually what we're doing at the Boiler Room. So there's normally a big fireworks fiesta event that happens on a park in the town. They normally have 15,000 people that turn up to it. It's a free event, and they torchlight procession through the town, and then it ends up in a big event with fireworks. But they're changing their model to a 5,000 cap ticketed event, and we will be, you know, government pending, so it should, as long as the guidance says that we can, we'll be providing music and a performance element to it. So I would encourage anyone that is watching to kind of contact your local authority, because I think they are in a position where they are desperate to bring culture back into the high street. They want to engage with their constituents and with the people that live in the town, because the towns are quite bare in some places, you know, the shops aren't open, and there's a lot of outdoor space that is available. And with some of the guidance that's come out with regards to like pavement licenses and being able to have road closures, I think, you know, if you can team up with someone, another delivering partner, or you can consider putting in a funding application to either PRSF or Arts Council, you know, we can be seen as helping to assist our local authority in bringing culture back, you know, kickstarting our towns, because that will bring people back into the high street, I think. I mean, that's what one of the things that we're doing. You mentioned Freshers, so we're working with one of our local universities about doing a Freshers event outside in a local car park. So that we'll see if that gets the go ahead. And but again, I think it's like you said, it's time possibly to do all those things you wish you could have a go at, but you haven't been able to you've been stuck actually running the venue.
Yeah.
So I was going to ask you, Claire, about a question about Arts Council England with regards to, do you think there's been a shift publicly with the perception of grassroots music venues? Do you think, you know, we've had such great campaigns like Let the Music Play and your campaign Let's Create, and also I think there's Let Us Dance. I mean, I think I've been certainly overwhelmed by the public response with regards to saving these spaces. You know, do you think that there has been, you know, arts and culture, there's been a shift? I think people have realised how important it is in their lives.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting point. And, you know, I guess at the beginning of the kind of lockdown period where we heard a lot publicly about the theatre sector, as the director of music at the Arts Council, I was really, really frustrated that we weren't hearing so much from music. And it's been really heartening actually to see the way that people have stepped up. And actually, I think the thing I'd reflect on that is my feeling is it has been effectively a grassroots kind of conversation, that members of the public were really aware in their local area of what they immediately didn't have access to. And that groundswell of support for venues you see coming through really strongly actually in some of the crowdfunding campaigns that have been going on, and the success of those, and the way that artists, and particularly bigger, higher profile artists, have really jumped back to support venues that they care about in their local area, which I'm not sure that, you know, some people have always been very good about doing that and about recognizing where they came from, but I think it's often been the case that once people get to a certain level in the industry, they don't seem to relate back quite as well. So it feels like a bit of a shift. And I think then, you know, the number of artists who've got involved with local venues, whether it's, you know, Frank with the Clapham, or looking at what Laura Marling did with the Union Chapel, you know, people actually thinking about what they could do that's quite imaginative, and that gives me a lot of heart really going forward. So where, for example, just going back to the question you asked me previously, you know, members of crew can't necessarily apply to the Arts Council for funding. I think one thing that venues could really strongly do is encourage the artists in their network to work with them to create really imaginative programs that draw in elements of the local community, maybe target audiences that weren't part of a venue's kind of mix before, whether that's because of a particular music genre or a particular constituent of the audience, and really start to do some of the work that's about going out into the community and bringing people to the door. I think I've reflected a few times that as a young person growing up, you know, I didn't necessarily have the confidence to go in through the door of the local music venue, and the irony of that, looking back now, you know, where I am and always was a passionate musician, I was doing all sorts of stuff, I was making all sorts of music, but it didn't feel like somewhere that I would be particularly welcome or belong. You know, we have this actually extraordinary opportunity right now because we can reach right into people's homes. They want to engage with us. And there are audiences who never have been able to come through our doors, and actually potentially in the future won't be able to come through our doors, but that doesn't mean they don't want to engage with what grassroots venues are and do. And we've got this great opportunity right now to really do something about that. So I see it as a moment where there's a kind of unique opportunity to invest in the future, rather than just kind of more in what isn't happening right now.
Would anyone else like to give any thoughts on that as well?
I'll just very quickly say that like totally echo what Claire's saying, and in that kind of process of thinking locally and acting locally, I'd encourage venues to kind of look at ways that they're building relationships with artists in their areas as well, and highlight the fact that artists can apply for funding that can then benefit venues as well. So the support that artists can get within their budget, they can support freelancers that are working at the venue, they can support those kind of live streaming innovations, and then eventually the IRL events that are happening at venues eventually as well. So definitely think creatively, like Claire said, about what projects you can kind of develop at this time where you're engaging more audiences and more artists, like and kind of those meaningful connections in both senses too.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. HARKIRIT and Rebecca, would you like to make any comment on that?
I think just locally we are trying to engaging with our local musicians and making sure that those musicians are looked after, and as soon as we can open the door, it's going to be coming down to the local bands and the local musicians that are, sorry, my dog, they're going to be there to get our doors open and put events on first. Time for touring acts is like 3 to 4 months minimum. So we're going to be relying on those local musicians to get the people in the door to start with, especially when the government is notorious for giving us absolutely no lead time on anything. So.
Yeah, put on a gig in 2 days. So we've got about 15 minutes left. So if anyone has any questions, please chuck them on the chats or the comments, and I can go through any of those. HARKIRIT, I wanted to just touch on what happened with you with regards to the recent government announcements around loosening of planning protections, especially in regards with commercial to residential. This is something, again, as an independent venue operator, you may not be aware of. But that kind of loosening of planning protections was announced in the end of July and comes into effect in September. And what it means is that if we have where we are as venues have a space next to us that's been commercial, it means that basically it can be changed to a residential space with a lot less red tape. That can obviously send us into a bit of a whirlwind of worry, because one of the things, the external factors that we have to make sure that we're managing and maintaining is, our neighbours, and making sure that we're not causing a nuisance. So tell me about what happened with the CRESCENT and the deed of easement. Explain to us a little bit about that so people can kind of get a feel for it. If you haven't frozen. I can see him nodding his head, so I think could be seconds away.
Yeah, okay, I'll do my best. It's kind of like jumping in and out. So basically, okay, we're surrounded on kind of all sides by developers, and recently there was a planning application that went in to turn a nursery next door to us that had been shut down into, first of all, it was flats, and then they changed it to holiday lets. And we were successful in appealing that application and getting it overturned by the local planning committee. But I think the reason we were successful around that was because of all the local advocacy that we'd been doing over the past year or so. So back in November, we managed to get the council to pass a unanimous motion pledging to support the music venues of York, specifically against the threats of developers, and also to kind of recognise that grassroots music and music venues are as culturally valid as the theatres or the churches or the museums of York. Now, that was massively important because it managed to change the conversation around music venues in the wake of other venues kind of shutting down in the city. And we, ourselves and a couple of others managed to get together and form a York music venue network. So I think why this is important is because it's kind of demonstrating a model of advocacy that happens at a national level. Say the work the music venue trusts have been doing has managed to change the conversation nationally. And things like agent of change, deed of easement, this is all kind of in our lexicon now. But what we needed to do is change it as well, whether local decisions are happening, where they're made, which is in your local council. So in that planning meeting, having the councillors talk constantly about deeds of easement or agent of change and so on, it was actually kind of really inspiring. So I would suggest that every kind of venue needs to go out there, identify local councillors who are sympathetic to their cause, start speaking to your local licensing more, your local planning department and so on, and kind of emphasise that, you're really aware of what's, what tools are out there in order to protect yourselves and change the relationship and conversation that's happening locally, because it's only with like national and local advocacy that we can like create change that's going to happen quick enough for us. So we've been pushing for a deed of easement which is like an agreement between us and the developer that basically is like a kind of contract that follows the ownership of the property around, saying that whoever moves into there will be made aware that it's next door to a music venue and they won't be able to complain about noise. And, you know, we're hopeful that we'll be able to reach some sort of agreement with that developer. Ultimately, we don't want to see the building just sat empty. We recognise that development is going to happen, especially in a place like York. But it's about how can we have more positive and constructive dialogues with developers rather than constantly kind of reacting to what's going on around us.
Yeah, I think if anything, that's one of the things that's come from this is actually how we can collaborate better with local authority, like Arts Council England, with PRS. It's how we're having a much more of a transparent, open conversation. And because people haven't got their busy lives where they're in and out and having meetings, we actually are speaking face to face with people. We're having access to people that probably we never would have had before because they would have been busy, in meetings a lot of the time. So I'm going to move on to our kind of some last thoughts on things. I want to pose this question to each of you and then get your thoughts on it. So recovery and building resilience, that's really, it's about relief and recovery within this panel. And it was really important. I wanted to try and focus, which I think we've done, on the positive steps we as venue operators can take to adapt and build this resilience, which will provide us with some legacy within our spaces. But how do we evolve? We've touched a little bit on changing our models, but for, and our teams and things. But for you personally, and as the the organisation that you're representing, how do you see this happening in the changing and moving forward? So, Maxi, would you like to go first, and then you can go each?
Yeah, totally. So yeah, for PRS Foundation, I think supporting past and kind of current grantees and applicants has been really important. So with our COVID response, we've started a Sustaining Creativity Fund, which is kind of in partnership with Spotify. And it's been very focused on recovery. And I think that's where PRS Foundation can aid venues the most, with that kind of timely project support to aid that recovery. And we would love our rebuild approach to involve more venues applying for that. So kind of, applying to the Open Fund for venues to kind of really evaluate and refocus your talent development work, establish yourselves as music hubs in your area, and get that support for your crucial role when it comes to supporting artists through programming and supporting diverse talent. And then also just to say, in my work with Key Change, we're really supporting organizations, supporting and encouraging organizations to examine kind of the resilience and sustainability of all areas of their work. So this isn't just venues, this is festivals, this is record labels, publishers, and yeah, we really think that gender equality is essential to sustainability and resilience. So we're encouraging organizations to kind of take our pledge at this time and think about positive changes you can make in all areas of your work. Just generally at PRS Foundation, we'll continue to adjust our programs to meet the latest needs of venues and organizations. So please do kind of stay in touch with us if you're watching about kind of what you're going through and any areas of support that you think are particularly urgent at the moment. And of course, we also work strategically with other funders and foundations to address those needs, including the Arts Council. So yeah, we I mean, I would never talk about this time as an opportunity, but I think that like using the time to kind of build that resilience and evaluate or reevaluate how and why you're doing your work is kind of, yeah, what we're focusing on.
Thank you. Claire, would you like to go next?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a massive thing for me, which is, I suppose, goes right into the heart of what Arts Council is trying to support the sector to do. I mean, we've been having, I think, a much more constructive conversation with the grassroots music sector for a while now, and as I said, we've got this Supporting Grassroots Live Music Fund, which has been running for about 18 months, and will be running. I should have said perhaps that when we relaunching it is a pot of 1.2 million, so it's a substantial resource that's available to venues. I think my longer term aspiration would be that venues don't need that special ring-fenced pot. They should feel able and confident to come into our main project grants fund all the time. And I mean, even now, as I think I said earlier, that the Supporting Grassroots Music Fund is up to £40,000 application. There's nothing to stop a venue putting in an application for even more than that. It just wouldn't go into that ring-fence pot. And I suppose the larger the amount of money, the more competitive it gets. So to be really competitive in those larger amounts of money, you need to be really confident about the application process. I'd be the last to say that the kind of processes that an organisation like the Arts Council has for applying are fun or easy. They're not. There are a lot of hoops, I guess, to jump through. And you know, I suppose the thing I've really reflected since joining Arts Council is how much that's to do with our responsibilities to the public, because we're dispersing public money, and therefore we have to really be able to evidence the value that brings. And as many people in the venue sector have said to me, grassroots venues bring enormous value for money. I think the kind of characteristics that really mark out great applications are some of the things that I'd love to see venues really thinking about and building into their work as they go forward. So accessibility, so that's both kind of physical access for disabled artists and audiences, accessibility in terms of being truly inclusive of different genres of music and giving the space to promoters from different kinds of backgrounds to shine through, and artists from different backgrounds to shine through, and realizing the richness that brings to the venue and bringing different kinds of audiences in. I think there's also a really important thing in there about partnerships and networking. So again, thinking forward and thinking about how difficult and challenging potentially it's going to be to get touring off the ground again. Groups of venues in different locations being able to come together to set up touring networks that then make it really viable for an artist to put on a tour, but actually you're sharing that burden between you and building and amplifying each other's work. It can drive tourism to different venues. You know, there's loads of really great benefits from doing that. So the power of working together and working really collaboratively with all different elements of the sector is something I'd love to encourage.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Rebecca, do you want to go next?
I think in terms of the lead mill and how we're going to be looking. Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry. How we're looking forward to going in the future. It's just a case of we're quite a dynamic and creative bunch of people anyway. I think it's just looking about what we've got coming up, and just being ready to open doors as soon as we're allowed, and adapting our program with what we're allowed to do at what stage. And I think as well, it is just like being engaged with the local community, and the local bands, making sure that they're ready to come in and perform safely and things like that. But the music industry, the live grassroots music industry, is such a dynamic bunch of people. We're creative and we will get through this, as long as the funding is in place and is easily accessible from Arts Council and the help from Prs Foundation. As long as that is accessible for everyone, and is easily applied for as well, and the guidance is there. We will get through this, and we will be able to survive.
And HARKIRIT, do you want to give us your comments? We've got a couple of questions, so if you can give me your thoughts in about 30 seconds, I can quickly do those questions.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I guess it's kind of linked to what we were talking about earlier around if the national conversation around like grassroots music venues has changed, then we need to strike while the iron's hot. So that means, you know, if you want to diversify what you're doing as an event, like we're going to be seeking a variation on our license so we can, you know, do club nights better, things like that. And then just collaboration, you know, being able to have those conversations with like the universities and so on, or the council that we weren't having before, being viewed as a kind of cultural institution much more. And that option, I think, is there for everyone now because of the way that the conversation has developed.
Thank you. Thanks to everyone for summing up your thoughts. I've got a couple of questions, so I'm just going to ask you for a yes or no. So do you think the touring landscape will change? We'll see artists doing smaller runs or weekend dates only? Yes or a no?
No. Well, maybe.
No, I don't think so. No.
No, I hope not.
I think it might change, but not specifically in that way.
And do we think the government has been too slow to support recovery?
Yeah, same.
Yes. Yes, I think it has been.
Yes.
Just the redundancies that happened in between
100%.
announcements and, you know,
yeah,
that it didn't have to happen.
Cool. Well, I want to thank you guys because we've hit our time limit. I'm just going to quickly give a synopsis from actually it's the Global Nighttime Recovery Plan. There was a really lovely paragraph there, and it's I'm just going to read a little bit. It says the overarching theme, I think, is flexibility. Hopefully, some of the newfound flexibility in such a highly regulated environment, like nightlife, will remain. Innovation always precedes regulation, and in this case, innovations are blurring the lines between private and public spaces, encouraging novel ways to socialize safely. So I think you know, and encouraging people that are using space to do that in an innovative way. And I think hopefully with this panel today, we've discussed some options. So thank you to everyone that's spoken on the panel. Thanks to IBW, and continue watching today. And remember, you're not alone if you're an indie venue operator. We're here to hold hands and help each other through it. Thanks very much, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Cheers, guys. Bye.
Bye.